Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Assembly Judiciary. Welcome to everyone here in Carson City, as well as those in Las Vegas and anyone watching online through YouTube or through Nellis. With that, Secretary, will you please take the roll?
Assemblywoman Bilberry Axelrod, Assemblywoman Cohen,
Here.
Assemblywoman Considine,
Present.
Assemblywoman Gallant,
Here.
Assemblyman Gray, Assemblywoman Hanson,
Here.
Assemblywoman Hardy,
Here.
Assemblywoman LaRue Hatch,
Here.
Assemblywoman Marzola,
Here.
Assemblywoman Mosca,
Here.
Assemblywoman Newby,
Here.
Assemblyman Ortlicker, Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong, Assemblyman Urick, Chair Miller.
Here, and please mark Assemblyman Orlicker and Assemblywoman Bilberry Axelrod absent excused. With that, just a few reminders that, again, we will have public comment at the end of today's hearing. Ask that everyone turns off all of the volume on all of their electronics. Just a reminder, too, that every day we need to make sure that if you're presenting a bill, that you get your materials into the committee manager by noon the prior day. And again, we're just friendly reminder not to have anyone approach the dais. With that, we will jump into today's agenda. We have one bill scheduled, and that one bill is Assembly Bill 342 by Assemblyman Hibbets. He will be joined in his presentation by Tom Clark and Brian Lewis, the CEO of IntelliCheck. Assembly Bill 342 requires an adult-use cannabis retail store and cannabis consumption lounge to take certain actions to verify the age of a consumer before selling cannabis or cannabis product. With that, I will officially open up the hearing for Assembly Bill 342. And gentlemen, please proceed when you are ready.
Thank you and good morning. Chair Miller and members of the Assembly Committee on Judiciary, my name is Brian Hibbets. I represent Assembly District 13 in Clark County. I appreciate the opportunity to come before you and present Assembly Bill 342. This bill requires adult-use cannabis retail stores or cannabis consumption lounges to verify the age of each consumer through an independent third-party age verification service. This bill also requires the Cannabis Compliance Board to adopt regulations setting forth the same standards of age verification into Nevada Administrative Code. Before going any further, with your permission, I will turn over my presentation to my co-presenter, Tom Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Tom Clark for the record here on behalf of IntelliCheck. I will turn it over to Mr. Brian Lewis, who is the CEO of IntelliCheck, who made it here last night at 12:30, but he's happy to be here. Thank you, Madam Chair, for hearing this bill, and Mr. Hibbets for bringing it forward.
Thank you, Chair Miller. This is Brian Lewis, CEO of IntelliCheck for the record. I got to say, this is pretty cool. Never done this before, so I like it. I think a little background would be helpful. We're a small little company that nobody's ever heard of, but we work with a lot of the banking giants in the world. What we do mostly is we work with banks and lenders, also the military, law enforcement, and a lot of age-restricted companies that are selling everything from cannabis, tobacco, and alcohol. Our primary revenue stream is not doing this. We look at this almost as a public service. We don't make a lot of money on it, but we know that kids getting things they shouldn't is a problem. Again, our primary revenue stream is stopping identity theft. So,
Okay, Mr. Lewis?
yeah.
And right now, what we need to hear is a presentation on the bill. So
Okay.
whether that will be from Assemblyman Hibbets or Mr. Clark, we actually need to, this is a bill hearing, so we need to hear a presentation on the policy that's stated in the bill. So I'd like to proceed with that, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tom Clark for the record. My apologies. I wanted to just give some context as to IntelliCheck and the new kinds of technology that's out there. Going directly to AB 342. Section 1 of the bill basically lays out that the adult-use cannabis retail store or cannabis consumer lounge when they sell cannabis or cannabis product to a consumer, the adult-use cannabis retail store or cannabis consumption lounge shall, 1, require the consumer to present a government-issued identification, 2, which is very important. And then sub B is to perform an age verification through an independent third-party age verification service that compares information available from public records to personal information obtained from the government-issued ID. And that's a big part of what IntelliCheck and many, many others do. This is not intended at all to be a piece of legislation that only benefits one particular company. There is a large industry that does this. In subsection 2 of section 1, this is where we ask the CCB to promulgate the regulations that will identify what technology is out there, set the standard for those types of technology, and the like. So, in essence, that's what this piece of legislation does. I will bring forward, too, that there are existing regulations for this type of activity. I was given by the industry the documents that demonstrate what they have to do currently. And the letter that was given to me is dated from March of 2018, which lays out the type of scanner that should be used in this particular rule. And it does name a couple of the companies that offer these kinds of services. But it's 5 years old, and it does not address really what the issue is in relationship to fake IDs. This is a public service piece of legislation that is intended to stop underage minors that have acquired fake IDs and can show those fake IDs. And there are different types of technology that can verify exactly, and that's what Mr. Lewis is here to do, is describe that particular problem to back up the benefits of the bill. The CCB does have regulation 7.015, and this is the duties of the cannabis establishment agent before the sale. And there, again, it just simply says that they verify the age of the consumer by checking a government-issued identification containing a photograph and using an identification scanner. But it does not get into the detail of the kind of scanner that you should use. And Madam Chair, if you don't mind, I would like to have Mr. Lewis discuss what the problem is here.
I actually want to find out what the problem is here too as well. So first, let's focus on, because the intent of the bill, I believe, is that you're saying that right now there's not a requirement by NRS to check the ages of people before they buy cannabis or cannabis products. So let's start there. So can we have, and I see there's also an amendment too, but can we, so again, can you reiterate that right now, who set up the requirement to check? Because we know people are being checked for ages before they buy cannabis and cannabis products. So where is that stated right now?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Brian Hibbets for the record. Currently, in NRS, there is no requirement for anyone to check identification. It is, however, in Cannabis Compliance Board regulations. The problem there is regulations can change at any moment because the board controls what those regulations are. If you look at, and forgive me, I believe it was AB 380 from last session. I could be wrong on the number, so please don't quote me on that one.
Fair enough.
There was an assembly bill that came through that required in NRS ID checks and scanning to purchase tobacco, which was passed and became law effective January 1st, 2023. There is no such law for marijuana. It is harder to buy a cigarette than a joint.
So then what you're attempting to do with this legislation is to put it in the NRS so that it does become law as opposed to policy.
Brian Hibbets for the record. That is correct, ma'am. Our intent is to make sure that it is in the state statute that it must happen, therefore it can't be changed as a regulation.
Absolutely, and I appreciate that because I know the concern would be that a board could just at any time, I think I would love to trust that it would never happen, but there is that window open that a board could literally just take a vote and change a regulation, change a policy. So I appreciate that, that policy initiative. So with that, and again, this is pretty standard, and even with, this is pretty standard, although it looks like it's been cut, that letter B has been cut out of the amendment that says perform age verification through an independent third party, and even number 2 about the board establishing regulations. So literally the amendment that we have, and I'm assuming this is a friendly amendment, Assemblyman, did this come from you?
No, it did not. This came from the industry.
And it says the Nevada Cannabis Association.
Correct. And I'm sorry, Brian Hibbets for the record.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Did you see the assembly? I'm sorry, the amendment?
This morning I did, yeah. I have sat and discussed the issue with them, and they said that they weren't happy with the legislation as written, and I said you were free to submit an amendment, and I'd be happy to work with them on it so that we can come to a middle ground somewhere, which we fully intend to do. So I'm not prepared to consider this a friendly amendment at this point, because I don't believe that it goes far enough. I think it's too loose as compared to the original intent of the bill.
Okay, so the Nevada Cannabis Association, and I appreciate that. So this is not a friendly amendment, but you are agreeing to continue to work with the industry and the association. So,
Brian Hibbets for the record, absolutely.
okay.
As we all know in politics, everything's a negotiation.
And so with their amendment, so members, with the amendment, you'll see that it's simply, again, cutting out sections B and number 2 about the third-party verification, and just remains with before a cannabis establishment agent sells cannabis or cannabis products to a consumer, the cannabis establishment agent shall verify the age of the consumer by checking a government-issued identification card containing a photograph of the consumer using an identification scanner approved by the appropriate board agent to determine the validity of any government-issued identification card. So I guess my question would be, how do you feel that doesn't go far enough? This is actually pretty typical in what happens in the state government of, there's obviously multiple vendors and such, and of course, we don't legislate for one vendor. So at that point, it's the ability for our state to determine which vendor they would go with. And again, once they give that approval, and Secretary of State comes to mind because they work with multiple different vendors, right? And they'll basically have an approved list. So once we have these vendors approved, they may come up with multiple vendors that they approve to check IDs. Are you saying it's still not getting at the same goal, which is making sure? Because I started to hear that there was a problem with fake IDs, and yet there's nothing in this that I'm not sure where the problem with fake IDs are. Do we have some data on the fake IDs and what's going on? And
Brian Hibbets for the record. With your permission, Chair, I would like to turn it over to the CEO of IntelliCheck to address that particular issue.
okay, but I would like to hear from Nevadans. I want to focus on the policy, not the business part of it. So, Mr. Clark, do you have the data on the fake IDs? And again, be prepared, because then the next question is going to be, if we do have a problem with fake IDs, and I'm not at anywhere saying that we don't, because fake IDs are a thing. Youth underage trying to purchase things that they shouldn't is a thing. It was a thing before cannabis was. It was a thing that, all the way back to Prohibition. It's always been a thing, right? It's just a kid thing. But my question is, how does, if the amendment says, yeah, sure, we'll go ahead and make sure there's a government-issued mechanism to prove these government-issued IDs, then why wouldn't that be far enough for you? Because isn't that getting to the point of the legislation? Still, they would find an independent third-party verification service?
Brian Hibbets for the record. There is nowhere in the amendment where it says third-party or verification. All it says is an identification scanner approved by the board. It doesn't actually say that I could use my flatbed scanner from 1994 and comply with this law, or this amendment.
Okay, so that's a part you would just like to tighten it up on the actual, to be more specific about the type of technology used.
Brian Hibbets for the record, that's correct. I simply want it to be something, basically all we're doing here is just putting into, if we were to adopt this particular amendment, we would just be adopting the same looseness that we have in the current regulation. And it's actually probably even a little more loose than the current regulation.
Okay, so more specific about type of technology. Okay, Mr. Clark, can you demonstrate the need for us, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tom Clark for the record here on behalf of IntelliCheck. And I want to frame this, the fake IDs are a problem. We recognize that. The technology that proves that that identification is fake is what we're addressing here today. And so, with your permission, Madam Chair, I'd like Mr. Lewis to talk about what he has seen, the statistics that they know, and, bringing it forward. Yes, he is the CEO of a company that provides this service, but as he mentioned, it is a problem that we hope to address, both statutorily and through the regulation.
So my question is, do we have data on what's happening in Nevada specifically?
Madam Chair, Brian Lewis for the record. I have what we did nationwide. I can easily boil that down and get it to you, what actually happened in Nevada. But we see it everywhere. It's not just one state, it's everywhere.
Correct. Again, fake IDs are, it's a thing. It just is. But we're interested in hearing what's happening in Nevada because we're writing policy right now for Nevada. So it's about, we would like to hear the need and what's going on here in Nevada. So how many, I don't know, do we have law enforcement in here? Do we have someone from the Cannabis Compliance Board that would like to approach? Because what I would like to hear is how often are fake IDs used in attempts to purchase cannabis, and how often are they caught?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Unfortunately, we do not have those statistics, and I think that leads to the problem because the way that the current law or the regulations sit, there is no tracking of how many identifications were presented, how many were deemed to be fake within the cannabis industry. I'm sure that law enforcement has those kind of stats on tobacco and on alcohol and other, age-appropriate things, but there really isn't a way to collect that data currently. I would, argue that there will be an opportunity for us to prove when we tighten up these regulations and they're using scanners that actually identify fake IDs, that we will have that statistic measure that we can bring back to you to prove that it's working.
Do we have any businesses here in Nevada that have been reprimanded for attempting either intentionally or non-intentionally to a minor? Wouldn't that be something we would have on record?
For the record, Tom Clark, we would have those types of statistics for those types of age-appropriate places, like tobacco and alcohol. Law enforcement would have those numbers, but because, and Mr. Lewis can demonstrate, the scanners that are being used predominantly do not meet a standard that catches the fake IDs that we see in the marketplace.
But I guess I'm trying to get to, are we seeing fake IDs in the marketplace? And again, do we have businesses here in Nevada that have been sanctioned for that very thing? I mean, I'm sure if I asked in other regards about selling underage alcohol, selling underage tobacco, that underage gambling, that there would be some data to support that when those, again, it's not about people attempting, it's about whether the business participates, right? So I'm wondering, do we have businesses that have attempted or accidentally sold to underage?
Brian Hibbets for the record, Madam Chair. In speaking with the industry, there have been instances where people have used fake IDs and it hasn't been caught, whether inadvertently because of human error, which is always going to be an issue, or because of their scanning technology.
And how many, do we know? Do we have a number?
I don't have the statistics. I believe the Compliance Board may have that, but I can't guarantee you that. I can tell you that from everything that I've been told, the retailers are very good at self-regulating because they don't want to be in trouble, because it's my understanding it's something like a $20,000 fine from the board. They don't want to get in trouble, so they want to use the best technology possible, but there's absolutely nothing mandating that they even try it other than a regulation.
Well, and I do agree with you. I absolutely do believe too that our businesses want to do everything that they can, and they don't want to get in trouble, and they don't want to have their businesses shut down. So they are following everything. So I will allow, within specific parameters, what we want to hear is strictly about data about fake IDs. This is not a presentation for a specific vendor. We do not legislate vendors. So please keep it strictly to the data.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to make sure clear, I'm not here to legislate for IntelliCheck. I'm here because there is a problem, and all these fakes are easy to get. Every kid I know knows how to get them. My children even told me, my daughter, after she got her bid in her sorority, the first thing they did was put her up against a blue screen. Everybody in the sorority class, they sent off to China. They get volume discounts, so it only cost her $40 to get 2 fake IDs. And the one thing that all these fake IDs do, and happy to afterwards show you real and fake and how you can't tell them apart. Every single fake scans, right? And the reason for that, and that's why just saying scanning does not mean you're validating it. There's a standard out there called the AMVA standard. That's the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators. They publish a standard that no state uses. However, the bad guys do. And I mean, a simple demonstration of it is, this is one that was built for tobacco. This is from the FDA, right? And that's why just saying scanning doesn't work. This is a free app. So I could download this. I'm going to scan this ID. And it's going to come back and say, no problem, she's 23. Go ahead and
Okay, I have a question. Can we get to the data about fake IDs? That's
Yeah.
what we're looking for.
So again, I will give you after this, I'll just get on my computer and download exactly for Nevada. But for cannabis, nationwide, 0.8% of the time, it's a fake ID. For alcohol, it's 2.6. For age-restricted delivery products, it's 3%. And when our law enforcement partners go and check IDs, almost 4% of the time it's fake, which is interesting since they scan last year about 400,000 IDs. So they're seeing a much higher percentage because they get everybody.
Can you repeat those numbers? So you said for nationwide for cannabis,
0.8% of the time,
0.8, so less than 1% of the time.
yeah, on about 4 million transactions nationwide.
Okay, and what was it for alcohol again?
2.6,
2.6.
yeah. Age-restricted delivery across
So
alcohol.
like 3 times the amount, okay?
Yeah, and age-restricted delivery of alcohol and cannabis is 3%.
When someone is purchasing alcohol and cannabis together at the same
No,
time.
like there are, in some states, they allow delivery of alcohol and/or cannabis, and the cannabis companies, the delivery companies there are specific to cannabis. So,
And did you give, you gave a third one, was that tobacco?
law enforcement. When law enforcement is checking things, so like Washington State, alcohol, tobacco, and cannabis, when they're going in and doing enforcement, that's 3.8% of the time.
Oh, okay, that was the third number. So less than 1% of the time cannabis, there's something wrong with the ID. 3 times more for alcohol. Okay, proceed.
In a way, that's really, the numbers speak for themselves. I can get you the data. I mean, every kid knows how to get them. Most of the time, your firewalls won't let you get to the websites, but there are multiple ones. There are websites that rate the quality of the fakes. And what I'd point out again is every single one of them will advertise the fact that they have all the holograms. They've got the micro printing. The certain states have plastic that bends different than others. Right? Most of this comes from China, where I think we buy the plastic anyway. You'll see all the time DHS catching 16 to 30,000 at a time coming into the shipment. So it is, not a small problem. And again, cheap, available, and scannable.
And Madam Chair, for the record, this is Tom Clark. I think you bring up a very important point, and that is, do we collect information on how often these are used throughout the state? We do not. I don't believe that there is a reporting mechanism from the dispensary or from the alcohol or from even tobacco to their regulating board that says we scanned this many IDs and this many of them were fake. I think that, our intent is not to overburden the industry even more. What we're basically saying is that the best way for you to identify that it is fake is to use these types of technologies across the board, that they prove out 95% of the time they identify fake IDs. That's the important data, and I think that it's a data point that needs to be collected so that we can have this conversation for real as to how, these underage folks are able to, acquire and get into cannabis. I will add to that too. There's a half dozen or so bills this legislative session that are going to expand the market for cannabis, whether it be lounges, vendors, those kinds of things. And it was my personal intent to ensure that each of those elements has a place where they are accurately scanning the identifications so that our children are able to, scam the system and get through and purchase the product.
So, thank you for bringing up that point. Assemblyman, let's make a note, and would you be willing to put that as an amendment as well, is to require the collection of how often this happens in the state?
Brian Hibbets for the record. You were referring to the statistical data of how many times somebody ID is scanned and it's not valid, it's fake, it's expired, that type of thing.
Sure, or not even scanned, but just caught, just somebody attempting to.
I would absolutely like to make an amendment for that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. And again, I guess, at this point, I'm just going to open it up for questions from the members. But I would like to see how much is in Nevada, because still, when we're talking about cannabis overall, it's less than 1% of the time. And so I think that's also a demonstration of how well the cannabis industry is actually doing in terms of doing everything properly and security and really making sure that they're checking ID and such. With that, I will give members a few moments to request some questions, so please just give us a moment. Okay, we will begin with Assemblywoman Constantine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for this bill. I was here last session on the bill that my colleague is talking about, the tobacco bill and the age verification. And that bill passed, and one of the things that I've heard since it passed from many people in my district is actually frustration and anger that they have to put their ID, that they have to hand over their IDs even if they're 40, 50, 60. Which led me, and a lot of those arguments were followed by, what are they doing with my data? Now they're asking for all of this data, which I actually reached out to LCB to find out the answer to that, because I need to respond to folks who have these complaints. And it's my understanding that there's no requirement to get data, and most of the scanners used for people buying tobacco just verify the ID. It does not provide, gather data. But the language in here makes me a little hesitant, because it literally reads to me that this isn't just ensuring that the ID is okay. It is data mining. It is going through the internet and finding personal information about that person to show that they are over 21. And then what happens to that data? And that seems to me, especially when we're talking about not alcohol, not tobacco, cannabis, which is a fairly new legal thing for a lot of people, there's another layer of privacy. What happens to that data? Where does it go? Who's using it? So that's my one question. But then if I can piggyback on that, I understand the whole fake ID thing. I think everyone who's grown up in this country from the beginning of IDs has probably done it. But this is whack-a-mole. You can do everything that you want to try to catch that fake ID, but then if somebody just says, okay, I'm going to have my picture, but I'm going to use somebody's name who's a real person that's over 21, they're going to find all this information that this person is over 21 anyway. So they're going to find a way to get around this. So how does that solve that problem? If I could have those two answers. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Brian Lewis for the record. A couple of things. There are multiple ways to see if somebody is real, right? There is three main ways people are looking to see if a license is a valid license. There is templating, which is taking a picture of the front and comparing it to what that should look like, right? There is understanding what's in the barcode and each state's unique features. There's a lot of hidden security features in these barcodes. The third way is going out and sort of, KBB knowledge-based, vetting, right? That's the one that goes out and tries to get data about you and see if it matches. Is there a Brian Lewis at 12 Southeast over? All that information. Scanning doesn't do that, right? The point of scanning is to see, does the format of that barcode match that state's format for that date of issuance? It doesn't require PII, personally identifiable information. All it requires is saying that that thing is laid out with all the hidden stuff that most people don't know. And I can tell you from experience, the bad guys don't know it. Now, that PII is not stored. It is, all that is in there is what's the information. Displayed can be on the device is name, state. This is what most of the people in my industry doing. It would be name, state, and age, so that if I want to do now an inspection to make sure that somebody didn't, print a fit, put somebody else's barcode on the back, make sure it matches the front. So, I'd say overall the industry is very, very clear that PII is not something that we want to store. This is purely for the purposes of validating that this piece of plastic is real and that you can trust what age is printed on it. That answer your question?
I guess I think I got confused because I thought that you were saying that that's what scanners do now.
Brian Lewis for the record. Scanners do not go out. Most people using scanning technology, myself, IDscan.net, other companies like that, do not go out and look for any other data, right? I will say that for the purposes of, credit and lending, which has far greater, needs on it for federal AML, anti-money laundering, know your client rules, you have to go validate other points so that you're making sure that you're not loaning money to a cartel. For the purposes of age validation, which in the industry most people call ID validation, there is no data. It is not stored.
Okay, so then this technology that you're talking about, you're saying that it goes out, goes on the internet. It doesn't. So how does it verify?
All right, so Brian Lewis for the record, what it's going to do is it's going to scan the barcode. It's going to pull the format of the barcode out. So yes, that PII is used just to say, does it meet the state format? After that, it's immediately, deleted from systems. Now, I can also tell you that for gaming here in Nevada, that data is stored when somebody walks into a casino because the Gaming Commission wants to be able to go in and walk in and say, was Brian Lewis in here recently? So you do store the data to do that. That can be made part of any legislation that says nobody can store the data from this. I can tell you from experience that we have clients that do like to store the data for a period of time because sometimes it helps the police in their investigations. If something's happened in the bar or things like that, the police often request, was Brian Lewis in here on the 30th?
Quickly, and we're going to wrap it up.
All right. So then what you're saying is some of these clients can save that data if they want to. And then just my second question, just since I'm running out of time. If I can just get an ID and use my neighbor's name because they're over 21, doesn't that go right past everything you're saying that this would catch?
Brian Lewis for the record. No, because the way that you get the ID, you pick your age, you pick your address, and you send a photo off to, generally most of these are located in China and India. And they create an ID, just like this, that has everything in it, except for the fact that this barcode is incorrect. It does not, for example, on this one, doesn't follow all the hidden secrets that South Carolina has in the license because for the most part, again, they're using that standard published by the group that all DMVs in North America belong to, but no province in Canada or state in the US or Mexico uses.
So what about if I just use my older sister's ID? We look alike. It's a legitimate ID.
Yeah, Brian Lewis, for the record, that's a real ID. So
So it's not going to catch a real
So
ID.
unless the person is looking at the photo and making sure, I can tell you that.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to know. I mean, you know,
There
people
are-
look an awful lot alike sometimes in pictures, so that's what I'm asking. We have a number of questions, so I'm going to allow members to get to their questions. Assemblywoman LaRue Hatch.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for answering our questions this morning. So I do echo my colleagues' concerns about the data, because I think as it reads, it does say compare information available from public records. That tells me that they're going out on the internet and looking for other public records. So if that's not the intent, I would suggest maybe an amendment to clean that up. But my question is, I understand that this is in regulation and you want to get it in NRS. I think that makes sense. And I think that the proposed amendment does that. My question is, why do we need to legislate this third party for cannabis when we are not legislating a third party for alcohol, which we see is happening 3 times more than cannabis?
Madam Chair, for the record, Tom Clark here on behalf of IntelliCheck. That's a really good question, and I think that one that as these fake IDs get better and better, and the technology to identify them hopefully keeps up, other industries, other products will be held to the same standard. I think Mr. Hibbets had a comment.
Brian Hibbets, for the record. I was simply going to say pretty much the same thing. I'd be happy to co-sponsor a bill with you if you'd like to make that happen.
All right, thank you. Our next question is from Assemblywoman Hardy.
Thank you, Chair. So I just want to make sure, you know, what the overall intent is you're trying to do here is to, similar to the tobacco law that was passed, that I worked on in 2021. We're just trying to have a way to verify IDs to help prevent underage children get cannabis, similarly to what we did with tobacco. Am I understanding that? We're not trying to say it has to be this vendor or whatever. That's just the overall intent of the bill, is to help prevent underage people getting cannabis.
Brian Hibbets, for the record. That's exactly it. The legislation that you and Assemblyman Hafen, put through last session to ensure that anyone buying tobacco had to have their ID scanned as long as they were 40 or under. When I realized that we don't have that in NRS for marijuana, I thought, well, why is it harder to get a cigarette than it is marijuana? That doesn't make any sense. Let's make it, not that I want it to be hard for people to get marijuana, I'm totally fine with it being legal, but let's make it just as regulated as tobacco is. There's no reason to not have ID checks in statute.
Madam Chair, Tom Clark for the record, if I may. Speaking of the data that's collected, as Mr. Lewis said, that data is not kept. However, and I was looking through my documents, and somebody from the industry I'm sure will be able to correct me if I'm wrong, they have to collect a certain amount of information because there are limits on the amount of cannabis that can be purchased by individuals in our state. So they will record the name, the address, the information from the consumer and how much they've purchased each given day so that they are in compliant and not overselling to that individual when they come in and purchase. So the scanning, the age validation that we are discussing does not collect the data, does not keep the data. However, when you go into the retail establishment, they are required to collect some certain levels of data to be in compliance with the law. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Our next question is from Assemblywoman Hanson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here. Thank you for coming so far. It appears I was here in 2021 with AB 360, and in the Assembly, everybody but two voted yes for the tobacco ID. So it sounds like we're having, and we want equity. I mean, that we talk so much about equity, and I think the intent of this bill is to provide, we treat the tobacco ID identification to protect minors from dangerous substances as we would protect minors from alcohol and cannabis. The scanning that we're doing now with that prior legislation of AB 360, is data was that a concern? I don't recall that conversation to the degree I'm hearing it today. So is there different scanning technology that the tobacco scanning doesn't do that this would do? Because it sounds like we're getting more into an issue of there's concerns about data. I do want to see we treat these substances the same in regards to minors. So if you could help me with that.
Brian Hibbets for the record. I was not here in 2021. However, I have read the law. And please correct me if I'm wrong, if I remember correctly, the law simply says that in order to purchase tobacco, if you're under 40, the ID has to be scanned by and I don't remember if it specifically says third party or if it just says something to that effect. But there's no, so I wasn't present for the debate on that particular bill, but there is nothing in the law, from what I remember, that says specifically that it must or cannot be, the data must or cannot be stored.
Can I follow up just real quick?
Quickly, please.
So, because I have no knowledge of understanding how this technology scanning works, and I think that's why it's important to hear from you in that regard.
And remember, we're focused on the policy of checking the IDs.
Absolutely. I'm just trying to understand, as part of the policy of scanning, which is mentioned in AB 360 of 2021, scan an ID, how, if you know, how is that scanning different than the scanning that we are addressing in this bill?
Thank you, Assemblywoman. I think that the intent was phenomenal. Oh, sorry, Brian Lewis for the record. The intent was perfect because people somehow, because it sounds right that if it scans, it means it's real. Problem is, as I showed with that FDA app, when I sat with the FDA, I brought 250 fake IDs. It didn't catch a single one. So I can download that app. I can go to the App Store and just search PDF 417, that's what this barcode is called, AMVA, and I will find multiple free apps I can download, and again, they don't catch any of these fakes. So I think the disconnect, and probably had been known, that just by saying scanning doesn't mean it's real. And I know, I've seen very large companies who don't want to scan because they think it'll cost them business. So I think that's the real difference, and why I think something has to have a level of efficacy. Let the law enforcement in each state determine what that efficacy is and say, go ahead, right? And then again, that's why I'm not here. I'm here to educate on the fact that people conflate scanning with validating, and they're totally different things.
Our next question is from Assemblywoman Cohen.
Thank you, Chair. We keep talking about the legislation from previous sessions, and I want to make sure that we're addressing it the right way, because, if we're going to address it, we're going to use it as an example that we're addressing it the right way. As I recall, the impetus of that bill was a concern with federal funding implications. So I guess my first question is, are there any federal funding implications if we don't pass this legislation?
Brian Hibbets for the record. Not that I'm aware of. If there is, nobody's brought it to my attention, and I highly doubt that the federal government is funding anything to do with marijuana.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, I was getting there. There was okay, and follow up. And so are you, with the language that was used in that bill having to do with reviewing the age verification, so that's not acceptable to you? Is that what you're saying, that that wasn't enough for you? Or, I guess we keep referring to that legislation, but then we're saying that that wasn't valid enough? I mean, I'm a little concerned, I'm confused about why that legislation's language isn't working for you.
Brian Hibbets for the record. I'm assuming you're referring to AB 360 from the last session. That particular law has no bearing whatsoever on marijuana sales. It does not touch it, therefore it's completely inapplicable to what we're trying to do here, which is simply this. Essentially, what we want to do is the same thing that was done for cigarettes and other tobacco products for marijuana.
Wait, can I follow up? Right, but that did not require the same amount of essentially receiving the same amount of data from a person to check their IDs. That's my point.
Because I think the question came up earlier from Assemblywoman LaRue Hatch about, do we use the same process or technology to verify IDs for alcohol or tobacco sales? And the response, I believe, was no. Is that what you're getting at, Assemblywoman? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tom Clark for the record. This is a more stringent request. We are asking that not just scanning be in the statute, but also that it age validation. And we allow the CCB, the Cannabis Compliance Board, to determine what levels those are. We ask that they be above that 95% accuracy level, which would be verified by law enforcement. But yes, this argument could have been brought forward in 2021. I don't understand why it wasn't, but marijuana is still against the law by the federal government standard, and it's an intoxicant other than tobacco is. And so you want to make sure that teenagers aren't getting their hands on these products. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank. With that, our next question is from Assemblyman Gray.
Thank you, Madam Chair and gentlemen. Assemblyman Hibbets, thank you guys for bringing this. I think it's a great companion bill to AB 360. Adds another level of protection for our youth and keeping people away from this that shouldn't be. If I were in the industry, I'd be for it, especially as we get into next level technology, which I'm assuming, sir, your company is not the only one in that market space. I wish we'd been allowed to hear your whole presentation, because I think as an industry expert,
Except for Assemblyman, we don't. This isn't about vendors, so please keep it to the policy. Continue.
It's about the technology that's used, and eventually, if we do pass, the state will have to choose it and have some knowledge of it, and eventually it will go to an open bidding process. So I do appreciate the information on that, because we do know it is a problem. As far as the mining data, or the data mining goes, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a real easy question. You guys are not really collecting information. You've got a customer that presents information to you, and you are comparing that to open source available information on the internet and retaining none of it except of what's required by the law to track that purchase, correct?
Brian Lewis for the record. Thank you, Assemblyman. There are some vendors in this space, that's how they do it. That's not how we do it. It's not how a lot of them do it. Again, what they're going to do is check for all the security features that are in a driver's license. For example, New York State has a digital signature that you need to know how to decode. New York State doesn't tell that to very many people. So it's that type of thing. There's subdirectories, there's all sorts of things you need to unlock. So we do not, when we are validating, and many other companies in my space, when we're validating that ID, the only thing we're going to the cloud for is to run it against our rules engine and then return a response of, it's fake, it's good, here's their age, or it's good and it's expired. That's what we return.
And thank you, Madam Chair. Tom Clark, just really quickly for the record. The idea behind this is not to single source from a state perspective. The state would not go forward with an RFP and say, anybody who meets this new standard, you apply, and if we select you, then every cannabis retailer will have to use that. The intent here is that the CCB will generate that, validation, what those specs are for those companies so that every dispensary can go shopping. And they'll find companies, many of them, like IntelliCheck, that will meet that standard and then can go into contract with those particular companies.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is from Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for the presentation. I'd like to just state something before I ask my question, which is I'm just a little bit concerned that we are pinpointing cannabis. You mentioned that nicotine is, that cannabis is a intoxicant. And I think we need to be really clear that as is nicotine, also addictive, as is alcohol, intoxicant and addictive. And it would have looked, I think, more equally if you had included all of those things in something like this. This looks intentionally targeted at cannabis, and I'm a little concerned. But I'm going to ask this question, and that is, do you know whether or not the regulatory board can change a regulation without going to the legislative committee? The rule is 21. Are you absolutely positive that they can change that regulation without going before a proper board, or is that a guess?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tom Clark for the record. I would ask that somebody from the CCB actually here to clarify that. I was in the hearing that they had on their money committee, and a similar question came up. They can pass regulations, and they're posted with the Legislative Commission. The Legislative Commission, if so chooses, can pull those regulations back to have a full hearing. Otherwise, they move forward without scrutiny from the Legislative Commission. And to your previous point, too, I recognize that we could have brought forward a piece of legislation that did age verification for every single industry, gaming, tobacco, and the like. And we decided, let's take one small bite at the apple, demonstrate, and I think that the chair's suggestion of collecting information to recognize how bad the problem is a good suggestion. Cannabis is the new industry, and it's looking to expand, and we felt that this was the best, most appropriate place to bring forward this particular piece of legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Our next question is from Assemblywoman Newby.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I was just wondering, in the bill, of course, it says, and you're advocating that the information on the ID be compared to publicly available information. And I'm assuming that that publicly available information would need to come over the internet. And that gives me concern, particularly in the rural areas, or even in the legislative buildings, say, when our internet goes out. Is that the case, A? And B, then what impact would that have on a business if they couldn't do that check?
For the record, Tom Clark, thank you very much for that question. I think it's also a really good clarification. We want to work with the industry, and I think that I just struck out the compares information available from public records from the statute, simply because there are other ways that can be deemed necessary and appropriate through the regulatory process and the CCB to ensure guarantees that this information is not, as Mr. Lewis said, it just bings, done, it's gone. That's all we're trying to accomplish here. And so we don't want it to be a system where it has to communicate online or otherwise. If, there's a lot of rural places in our state, and we take that into consideration as well. So it has to be that kind of thing. The other, and it just came to my mind, the other thing that the existing regulation doesn't take into consideration is that these newer technologies are available on your phone. So if you are going to go out to a remote location, you can still use and scan the technology and it still be appropriate. And I think that that is going to play well if these other pieces of legislation move forward that create vendor stations and vending machines and the like. So, understood. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Our next question is, our last question actually, is from Vice Chair Marzola.
Thank you, Chair. So I think I'm a little confused. So help me out here, and it may just be me. So is the industry using scanners now?
For the record, Tom Clark, they are. Under the regulation that was adopted in 2018, the type of scanner, those rules are the ones that they follow today.
Okay, follow up.
Yes, please.
And have you been in conversations with the industry to where they're telling you there's been an issue, whether teenagers being caught with fake IDs or citations being given by the police, anything like that?
For the record, Tom Clark, that conversation has been very brief, and that's when they brought forward the rules that they work by now, which are the letter from the Department of Taxation and the existing regulation. There's been no conversation as to how big the problem is, simply because we aren't collecting the data to know how many IDs are presented and how many are fake and how many are real and the like. So I think there was a second part of your question, but it jumped out of my head.
Well, it probably jumped out of my head too. I guess I'm just trying to figure out, I understand the intent, right? Protecting our children. I get that 100%. But I'm trying to figure out, how do we know there's a problem if, one, there's no data and there's been no extensive conversation with the industry who does this day in and day out? That's what I'm trying to figure out, if you can answer that.
For the record, Tom Clark, and I think that that conversation that will take place after this hearing with the industry to find where that is, I agree. They don't want to be bad actors. Nobody does when it comes to this. But if the law and the regulations simply states this is what you need to do, that's, as a business owner, that's what you're going to do. And what we're suggesting is that that scanning technology that is used be the gold standard when it comes to cannabis and cannabis compliance, because, you know, ultimately we hope that they wouldn't, you know, use a scanner that they downloaded for free that isn't validating the information. But if the law simply states that they've met that standard, there isn't really necessarily a reason to go above and beyond that. Are we looking at, yes, there could be bad actors, and we pass a lot of legislation that are focused on the bad actors. Having worked with the industry as long as it's been alive, I recognize that they really do want to do the right thing. And sometimes, as we've heard many times in testimony this legislative session, this industry is getting hammered by regulatory environments. We don't want to make it more difficult or increase fines and the like. We simply want to make sure, from, as you said, it's a public safety issue to make sure that kids are not getting access to cannabis.
Last question, Chair. Please. Do we know what type of scanners that the industry is using?
For the record, Tom Clark, I do not specifically know, and again, it's something that's location by location by location by location, and as long as they meet the standard that was set forward in 2018 as the type of scanning device, that's what I'm aware of. I'm sure that there'll be plenty of people coming forward from the industry that can correct me on that particular front, provide you with some facts on that.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. With that, I will go ahead and open it up for testimony. So we'll start here in Clark County. I'm sorry, I saw our Clark County DA walking up and my brain went Clark County. We will open it up here in Carson City for anyone that would like to testify in support of AB 342.
Thank you, Chair Miller, members of the Assembly Judiciary Committee. My name is John Jones. I'm here on behalf of the Nevada District Attorneys Association. We do support this bill along the same lines as Assemblywoman Hardy indicated, that it does equalize the procedures and statute between cigarettes and marijuana. And also following up on Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong's comment that we do feel that alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana should be treated similarly. And Vice Chair Miller and, Vice Chair Marzola and Chair Miller also asked questions about stats. So I did have an opportunity to reach out to Bridget Duffy while the hearing was going on. She is chief of our juvenile division in the Clark County DA's office. She did want me to point out that when we see citations for possession of false identification, those are generally handled informally by the harbor in Clark County for the first offense. For the second offense, they would then go to the Department of Juvenile Justice Services and be handled informally by intake. And then your third or subsequent citation would be handled through the court process. She also did a quick, and this is quick, look at stats, and she could not find any citations specifically for minor in possession of a false identification within the last year. Now, will point out that oftentimes we'll see them come through as obstructing or other charges, so that doesn't mean we haven't seen any of these specific facts, but they just haven't come in under the false ID citation. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone else here in Carson City that would like to testify in support of AB 342? Okay, we will move to Las Vegas. Is there anyone there in Las Vegas? Hi. Please remember to state your name and spell it so we have it accurate on the record.
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Kenneth Petticord, first name Kenneth, last name Peddicord.
Please proceed.
Would you like me to proceed? Thank you. I'm here on site to note our opposition to Nevada Bill AB 342.
Sir,
We're the long-term
sir,
age verification.
Sir, we've
Yes.
not opened up opposition yet. We're still in support. So
Very good.
for
My
people to
apologies.
testify in support, hello?
Yeah, there
Okay,
we go.
you're still there, good. So, because you're physically there, is there
Very good.
is there anyone else in the room with you right now?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so if you just hold on a moment, and we'll get back to you for opposition, okay?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Broadcasting, can we go ahead and open up the phone lines for anyone that would like to testify in testify in support of AB 342?
There are no callers at this time.
Thank you. With that, then I will go ahead and open it up first here in Carson City for opposition of AB 342.
Hello, Chair Miller and rest of the committee. My name is Will Adler, and I'm representing the Sierra Cannabis Coalition today. The Sierra Cannabis Coalition is in general opposition to this bill due to its sort of duplicity of current regulations and laws that we already follow around ID verification, scanning those IDs, and sort of the processes we go through. The cannabis industry is very meticulous when it comes to ID scanning, as is today. We actually have sort of a three-step verification of IDs already, where you have to be scanned to get into the building and then verified upon reaching your register that you are the person that was scanned into the door and that your ID is you again at the register. And then when you receive your products, they have to actually sort of verify you again on the way out, and they give you the receipt and take the cash for the product. So we have a lot of personal interactions, especially when it's in the building. And then when we have ID scanned in a drive-through sort of scenario or a curbside delivery, is done on electric verification already, and sort of a meticulous process as well to make sure they do the front and the back of the card to ensure that it is a real card and a Nevada card or even a passport of all kinds. We sort of have to do the gambit because Nevada accepts cards from every single state, medical marijuana cards that is, and actual IDs. So we have the most meticulous scanning process today because very few other states take anyone else's medical marijuana cards at all. So just sort of laying the ground rules for where we're at as an industry. But it was also stated that as an industry, we retain some information of customers when we verify them or scan them in because we're only allowed to sell 1 ounce of marijuana to a participant in the sale process at a time. A little bit more for a medical patient. That isn't true, actually, because we were actually told we were not allowed to retain any of their information because of the medical marijuana process and sort of the crossover there between medical and retail. They said that we could only sell up to the max at one purchase at a time. But it was openly asked in the workshops and hearings, is it on us to prevent somebody from taking that, putting it in their car, and then getting back in line? And they said no. Upon your best efforts, do try and deter that. But if folks do want to come in and purchase again their full purchase limit, it is not on you to actually stop them in any one given day. And we do see people who do stock up, kind of, who live out in the rurals or some other places, and then it's not really on us to prevent that. But it is sort of known and a part of the industry today. But we do not retain that information because previous medical marijuana, other ties to personal information that were not acceptable in the past. But thank you very much for hearing this, and it just feels a little duplicative on what we already do in the industry today. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Brett Scolari with Strategies 360 here on behalf of CPCM Holdings, Cura Cannabis, and Clark Natural Medicinal Solutions. We are in opposition. I have met with Mr. Clark. I have met with Assemblywoman Hibbets. Don't want to belabor the points that have been made in the line of questioning. We also have questions. I've been in this industry 8 years, and I can tell you that age verification is the probably single most important thing that the industry does. As Mr. Adler mentioned, these are highly trained security people that check these people at the door. Then they're verified again in the point of sale system. IDs are scanned by technologies. I'm not sure there's a comparison of technologies and what this bill's actually trying to get at, but IDs are scanned and fake IDs are caught, I can tell you that. But the human error piece is always going to be there no matter the technology we use. And there has been human errors, and the licensees have had to self-report those errors to the Cannabis Compliance Board, and they face those consequences. So this is really top of mind, and we have concerns that we're number one, being targeted on this bill, and also backed into using one sort of platform. I think the licensees would like some flexibility. There are point of sale systems that have this technology. There's different types of scanners, but you get to the same result. And I can tell you, I'm just not aware that that underage problems are happening in the industry because there are so many safeguards. A customer can't even bring in their child when they purchase. You can't even have a child with you even though and you're purchasing. So just wanted to give you that background. 100% willing to work with the sponsor, and we would support the amendment that the Cannabis Association set forth along those lines, but I think we just want to be real careful we don't get boxed into a corner on this, and we have some consequences and added costs that are passed to the consumers. So thank you very much.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. AJ Delap on behalf of the Nevada Cannabis Association. With your permission, Madam Chair, I'd like to address the amendment that was brought in on behalf of the Cannabis Association.
Yes, please.
Excellent. Thank you. I appreciate that permission. To be clear, the Cannabis Association, Nevada Cannabis Association, certainly supports identification verification. We are in full support of that, and we appreciate the conversations that we've had with the bill sponsor, Assemblyman Hibbets, and the co-sponsors as well. And we are certainly looking forward to working with them on that. However, based on our amendment and the rules of the committee, we're going to come in opposed. And if I can address the amendment, what the amendment does is it codifies in NRS the code that already exists within NCC. Oh, I lost the last. There you go. Well, this gentleman's phoned a friend. It already exists in that regulation, and we certainly understand the need for codifying the identification verification in NRS. The concern that we have is that it goes farther than that. The original bill goes much farther than that, and it starts to constrict the ability of the Cannabis Control Board to provide the regulations that it sees fit for the citizens of Nevada to authorize or to verify identifications. So you're basically, in some degree, tying the hands of the Cannabis Control Board by the furtherance of the language that's in the bill in its current form. We believe that authority should remain in the Cannabis Control Board's purview, and they can make the decisions on what they feel is best for the citizens of Nevada for their verification system. The tightness of this language in the original bill form in some degree leads itself to one particular portion of the industry that can only provide such things as 95% accuracy. That's a tricky number. How do you verify that? Where does that come from? And now that's in NRS. That's a difficult thing to overcome because it takes 2 years to change NRS. And then the arbitrary number of 95%, we're going to get into discussions on how we even prove that. So it's our position that, yes, the identification verification certainly should be brought into NRS, but beyond that, the control needs to be left in the Cannabis Control Board. And that's the position that we're taking. We appreciate your time, ma'am.
Chris Anderson with Solid Consulting, representing Planet 13 Holdings and Hardin Premium Cannabis Dispensary. We oppose this bill because it's a solution in search of a problem. There really isn't a documented problem with age verification in the cannabis industry today. But I did want to come up and point out a couple of facts that didn't seem to be demonstrated in earlier testimony. There are a couple of statutory references to age verification currently in NRS 678B.210 and NRS 678C.420. Additionally, I just wanted to let this body know that cannabis licensees are subject to violations including a $25,000 fine and/or a 20-day revocation of our dispensary license for the first violation of selling cannabis products to a minor, and that's without regard for our best efforts to prevent sales to minors. So we are being held thoroughly liable today, and just don't think that we need any more regulations on this issue. Thank you.
Is there anyone else here in Carson City that would like to testify in opposition of AB 342? Not seeing anyone? Is there, sir, are you still there in Las Vegas? Hi, good to see you again.
Hi, Madam Chair. For the record, this is Kenneth Petticord. I'm here on site to note our opposition to Nevada Bill AB 342. We're the long-term age verification provider for more than 75% of Nevada dispensaries. According to our most recent data review performed this week across our client base of Nevada dispensaries, roughly 2% of IDs presented at Nevada dispensaries are flagged as potentially fraudulent. But I want to emphasize that they are flagged. The state of Nevada already requires digital ID scanning and has already set a standard that protects minors, catching 95 to 98% of fake IDs using high-resolution, multi-wavelength document authentication. The current requirements include not only scanning of the 2D barcode, which can catch roughly 50% of the fakes, but also of UV, IR, light, hologram examination, and watermark examination. AB 342 is searching for a problem that doesn't exist. In addition, the method of age verification proposed in AB 342, checks against a third-party database, is an inferior method of age verification compared to document authentication. Current public record databases of issued IDs, such as DMV databases through the American Association of Motor Vehicles, do not include all states. Large states such as California and New York do not participate in open database sharing. Any company that purports to have access to a 50-state database of current valid IDs is being misleading. Secondly, there are no commercially available databases of internationally issued IDs. Given Nevada's popularity as a destination for international tourism, dispensaries must be able to verify age using international passports. Thirdly, checks against a third-party database have a per-scan cost. Nevada dispensaries are collectively scanning hundreds of thousands of IDs on a weekly basis. Per-scan fees will be an undue financial burden on these small businesses without actually improving the safety of minors. And finally, third-party checks require an internet connection and will not work offline. 95 to 98% of fake IDs can already be detected under the current NCCB guidelines. Switching to a model that requires querying a third-party database introduces many gaps and challenges in coverage, both with US IDs and in particular with international documents, as well as PII and privacy risks. AB 342 is not in the best interest of the state, does nothing to improve dispensary security or the safety of minors, and is simply a lobbyist push to create a more favorable regulatory environment for their client. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Is there anyone else there in Las Vegas that would like to oppose AB 342?
I don't think so, Madam Chair. There's no one in the room.
Okay, thank you. With that, then I will open it up for opposition testimony on the phone lines. Broadcasting, can you please open the lines?
Chair, there are no callers at this time.
Thank you. Then I will go ahead and open it up for testimony in neutral of AB 342. Is there anyone here in Carson City that would like to testify in neutral? Is there anyone, I don't believe there's anyone left in Las Vegas, but anyone in Las Vegas for neutral? Okay, then broadcasting, I'd like to open it up for testimony in neutral on the lines.
Chair, there are no callers at this time.
Thank you so much. And so with that, I will go ahead and close testimony and welcome the bill sponsor and presenters back up for any final remarks.
Brian Hibbets for the record. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the committee members for hearing the bill. I look forward to working with the stakeholders to fine-tune it to make it a little bit better. And hopefully we can get it in front of you again for a work session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Assemblyman. And with that, I will go ahead and close the hearing on AB 342. Our last item today is public comment. So is there anyone here in Carson City that would like to make public comment? Please remember to say your name and spell your name so that it's on the record. And also that public comment is not about the bill that we heard today, but anything else that's under the purview of this committee. Please proceed.
My name is Esperanza Robles, spelled Esperanza And I just wanted to say that I'm here with my best friend Olivia, and we are in Assemblywoman Alexis Hansen's district. And we're just here to hear bills that are of concern to kids, especially our age, in Nevada, and so this bill was one of them, and I think that is of concern, and there are things that could be fixed, but also things that are very eminent and of extreme concern in our society today.
Thank you so much for your public comment. Is this your first time presenting or speaking to the legislature?
Yes, it is.
Well, you did a wonderful job.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is your best friend coming up? Okay. Just because public speaking is one of those life skills that will take you very far in life. So, just wanted to give you that. Okay, so we're there. Not seeing anyone else here in Carson City to give public comment. Is there anyone in Las Vegas? Broadcasting, is there anyone on the line to give public comment?
Chair, the public line is open and working, and there are no callers at this time.
Okay, thank you. Then with that, I will go ahead and close public comment, and we've completed all of our business for the day. So I will adjourn this meeting, and I will see you all back tomorrow at 8 a.m. This meeting is adjourned.